10 good things about Cenk Uygur? Impossible, you might say. I'm a fan of Sargon of Akkad, and I know there's plenty of things wrong about Cenk Uygur, but there's also some things that are good about him that are worth noting, so we're gonna jump right into it. Number 1.
Karen, thanks for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Cenk gave Karen Strawn a lengthy interview on TYT Interviews and included a 4-minute segment of it on the main The Young Turks YouTube channel. Even though he got frustrated with her towards the end, she was given more than enough time to make her points. Props for giving Karen Strawn a fair, unfettered opportunity to speak on his platform and deliver her message to his audience. Number 2.
I'm sorry, if you're a Democrat and you like Obama, I hate to break your heart and you want to hate me for it, that's fine. But Obama wouldn't have done that. That's not who he is. He's not that guy. In this case, it's an absolute fact because Obama's president right now. He could have pressured Carrier, but he didn't pressure Carrier. He didn't pressure United Technologies, and he didn't threaten to take away their government contracts. Because he's not that strong.
Cenk called out former President Obama for not compelling corporations to keep jobs here in the United States. He also gave credit to Donald Trump for doing what Obama didn't do, even though Trump hadn't even taken office yet. Props to Cenk Uygur for having the decency to praise Trump in spite of his intense dislike for him.
So today, nice job, Donald Trump, and Democrats, as usual, you ought to be embarrassed.
Number 3.
Of course, this has to do with race, but it also doesn't. So let me explain that and then give you the background of what actually happened.
On January 14th of this year of 2017, Cenk acknowledged that slavery in America wasn't necessarily about race and had the decency to point out that the vast majority of white people did not own slaves, and there were black slave owners who owned slaves after they had been freed from slavery.
A lot of people think most of the black people in this country were slaves at one point. That is true. Then they think most of the white people in this country owned slaves. That is not true. Did you know that 95% of the slaves were owned by just 3% of the white population? And it's true that some freed blacks also then went on to own slaves. So not all of them did, most of them did. But some who were freed stayed in places like Charleston and wound up taking slaves of their own. So I just want you to have that piece of context. It's not about blaming anybody, and that is the reality of what happened here. It's about learning from it.
To hear this kind of declaration from a man like Cenk Uygur was surprising to say the least. Number 4. Cenk also called out Hillary Clinton for not accepting that it was her fault that she didn't gain enough votes to win the presidency.
The fourth possibility, that Hillary Clinton lost the election because of Hillary Clinton. So let me be audacious and outrageous and posit that perhaps it was the responsibility of the candidate to win the election.
I remember arguing with my family that it was Ted Cruz's fault and Ben Carson's fault for not winning the Republican candidacy. These men lost the Republican candidacy because, in spite of their higher moral sensibilities, they couldn't win votes as much as a man like Trump. A man covered in scandal, but nonetheless, a scandalous man who actually knew how to make people vote for him in spite of it all. If he could win, as he did, then they should have been able to win, and they didn't. It seems like Cenk Uygur realized the same for Hillary Clinton.
You could have said, hey, I'm going to give you some change, but you didn't. In the Democratic Party, you could have run a non-establishment candidate in a time where the country is obviously thirsty for change, and you didn't. Don't go around trying to blame everyone else. Oh, it was the Russians, it was the FBI, it was Facebook. No, I got bad news for you. It was you.
Number 5.
Well, neither one is true, so what difference does it make?
Cenk interviewed Sam Harris for 3 hours. They butted heads constantly, but Cenk nonetheless remained civil and polite the entire time. He did not prevent Sam Harris from having ample time to speak in spite of his serious disagreements with him.
It's the specifics that make it less probable. If you just think he's going to come back somewhere, that's one thing. If you think he's going to come back to Jackson County, Missouri, that's less likely. And that is a mathematically true point. This is just probability theory.
Even if I were to grant you that, which I definitely do not grant you, but even if I were to grant you that.
You're going to hear from a bunch of mathematicians who are going to insist that you grant that.
Number 6.
I thought she said that they are not people. It turns out, I think that in this proper context, it is that she did say they were not peaceful.
Cenk had accused Sarah Palin of saying that Black Lives Matter protesters aren't people. He later realized she had said they were not peaceful, and he admitted he made this mistake and even thanked his critics for catching him on it. His apology was quite disingenuous. He mocked the critics who called him out for it, but props nonetheless for admitting his mistake on his show rather than pretending it never happened.
But we got to make sure every part of it is right. And so even though you think like, oh, we got you and all that stuff, thank you. I don't mind the corrections. I like the corrections. We want to be as right as we possibly can. We're nowhere near perfect. We make mistakes. Thanks for pointing it out. So that's why we took that video down, and I just wanted everybody to know that. Still horribly obnoxious comments by Sarah Palin, but we don't want to get any part of it wrong. So thank you.
Number 7. Cenk had a debate with Ann Coulter at Politicon. He not only let her have her say, but gave her so much time to speak it was more like an interview on stage. It's important to recognize that Cenk does interact with people with whom he vehemently disagrees. To be fair, he still won't interact with Sargon of Akkad, but surely he was never obligated to let Ann Coulter say so much. He could have been so much more harsh and interrupted her many times, but he didn't. He restrained himself, and it made for a heated but interesting dialogue.
I disagreed with Obama on sending more troops in. You gotta say, hey, we found agreement. You see that? Politicon is working.
Number 8.
We've had guys on the show who are these right-wing guys who say all the rights of men have been taken away, et cetera, and they're crazy, right? But is there some truth to the fact that the justice system has now been skewed in these kind of situations, especially in divorce proceedings, to favor the woman over the man to a degree that it seems unjust? In my case, in my way of thinking, yes.
Cenk recognizes at least some of the abuse of men in divorce courts. The Young Turks have made at least 2 videos on this topic wherein they decried the unfair rulings that allow ex-wives to take huge amounts of money from their former husbands. Cenk found it just as absurd as a lot of the men's rights activists with whom he disagrees. Good for him.
But why does a guy have to give someone else who has their own profession, makes plenty of money on their own, why does he have to give her $30,000 a month extra? That makes no sense to me, and I think to a lot of other people.
She doesn't care about the house as much, but she's getting more cash.
Right.
Good for you. Okay, way to rob him a little bit more. Okay, yeah, women power. Are you proud? Is that a feminist thing? Yeah, I snatched another $11,000 off his ass.
That's not a feminist thing.
No,
Don't put
and
that
that's
into
because
it.
this goes to point number 2 and part of my rant. She's a perfectly successful singer in her own right.
She is.
So why does she need his money?
Number 9.
And then, but what might be my favorite has nothing to do with this story except for the fact that she's an enormous and hilarious liar. So now, okay, we've established, okay, a hilarious liar.
Cenk properly called out Rachel Dolezal for lying about her black heritage. He specifically called her a liar, though he initially thought she wasn't guilty of having done anything really wrong. He reversed that verdict later in light of further study into the issue. I'll give him credit for not letting her off the hook, even though a lot of other people seem to want to do just that.
When you consider all that, the new verdict is fairly clear. Guilty. No. Her actions had consequences, they were real, and they were damaging. She should not have done any of this. And the good works that she did at the NAACP are great. Perhaps she did them, but they don't solve the underlying problem here, which is that she pretended to be something she's not, and it was hurtful.
Number 10.
I've written a 2,000-page book about this. My argument about Obama is different.
Even they didn't clap.
Cenk won that debate with Dinesh D'Souza. A lot of people talk as if Dinesh mopped the floor with Cenk, and that's just not true. I've watched that debate more than 5 times. Cenk did a lot of things wrong in this debate. His was not a landslide victory. You could say he only won 51% of the points, i.e. he won by a slim margin, but he left Dinesh D'Souza flustered and nervous on multiple occasions. Anyone who doesn't hate Cenk Uygur with extreme prejudice should admit that this debate was not the meltdown for Cenk that it has been made out to be.
George W. Bush never had a deficit exceeding $500 billion.
That's because he was handed a $5 trillion surplus. Context, facts. You attempt to mislead, I clarify. We can do this all night long.
That claim Cenk made about the surplus is very challengeable, if not outright false, but Dinesh D'Souza left it unchallenged. Cenk is a very easy target to hit. He is handicapped by really bad ideas and reasoning faculties on a good many issues. Someone as sharp as Dinesh D'Souza should have had zero difficulty making Cenk out to be completely off the rails, and the fact that Cenk had him on the run at all just made Dinesh look worse in my eyes. Yes, Cenk Uygur did some pretty silly things in that debate, but if I were to judge who succeeded in making his opponent's position look the worst, my verdict would go to Cenk Uygur. I hate to admit it, and I do so grudgingly, but I declare Cenk Uygur won his debate with Dinesh D'Souza. I give him credit for holding his own against an opponent much smarter than himself, because I never expected that out of Cenk Uygur. Those are the 10 good things I thought were worth mentioning about Cenk Uygur. Now, I know some of you are wondering, but are you ever going to make a video criticizing Cenk Uygur? Wait for it. Of course!
Of course, of course.
But I figured it was good to do a video about some of the good things he has said because, admittedly, my impression of him was pretty biased and I thought he was a complete lunatic. Turns out, he's still very much wrong on a lot of stuff. But he's not quite the lunatic I thought he was before. So until next time, thank you for watching and I will see you again on the Prince Asbel channel.